I never thought that a hospital visit would end up being a war declaration. I was refilling Malik's water when I saw her smiling. Not a twitch, not nervous, full smile, wide enough to show both rows of teeth. He had just come out of another round of tests, the kind that tell you how much time your child has left. Stage 4. Liver. Terminal. I was still standing, but my knees had locked, and I had to grip the tray table so I wouldn't sit down from shock. When I asked her why she was smiling, why she looked relieved, Simone didn't blink. She stepped closer to me, pulled her cardigan tight, and said, "In 2 months, I get the house, the car, and those shares." Behind the curtain, a nurse, Jada, the one with the flower pins, froze mid-step. She didn't mean to overhear, but she did. I didn't say a word. I put the water down, adjusted Malik's blanket, and walked out into the hall. My hand trembled on the sanitizer pump, but I kept it moving. I needed a bathroom, a chapel, a phone. I didn't know which first. What I really needed was 5 minutes to scream, or to hit something. But I couldn't afford it. I still had my son in that bed, still breathing, still mine for now. At the nurse's station, I asked for Jada. She came fast, lips tight. I said, "You heard what she said," and she nodded, silent. "Can I write that down and have you sign it later?" She said yes. I asked her for her full name and credentials, then typed them into the Notes app on my phone, thumb-tapping hard enough to leave a dent. Back in the room, Simone was helping Malik sip broth like nothing had happened. She kissed his forehead, wiped his chin, looked at me over his shoulder like we were co-parents planning a vacation. I smiled right back. My mouth was a mask. I sat, pulled my pen out of my purse, and began flipping through the manila folder Malik kept by the bed labeled "Important." Inside, a power of attorney. Her name on it. Dated 2 months ago. I started reading right there in front of her. My duplex still smelled like hospital soap. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I opened that old white binder, the one with Property/Will, Mama and Malik, written in Sharpie. I made the tabs myself years ago, using cut-up index cards and Scotch tape. Back then, it was mostly dreams. A copy of the lease we thought we'd buy out, my emergency contact forms, a printed email about term life insurance we never got. But now it held something harder. A scanned copy of Malik's will, half finished, 2 signatures missing, and Simone's name still sitting in too many blank spaces. I stared at the section marked Healthcare Decisions until my eyes burned. I had nothing warm in my stomach but peppermint tea. I whispered into the steam, "How did we get here?" But I knew. I'd raised him alone since 1989, the year his father walked out with his toolbox and a bag of cassette tapes. I held 3 jobs and still brought him to choir practice on Thursdays. I once took a bus from South Shore to Evanston and back just to buy him a used clarinet someone posted in a church bulletin. We'd survived layoffs, school closures, bad landlords, worse friends. One foreclosure nearly took us both under, but we clawed back. I sold jewelry, took night classes, got that paralegal certificate when I was 42, and tired every single morning. I had spent 3 decades keeping him alive and afloat. And now Simone, this girl with her smug mouth and acrylic nails, thought she could sweep in and manage his death? A gust rattled the window. I flipped the page. There was a note from Malik in the pocket sleeve, his handwriting from December. "Mama, keep this safe. I'll sign the update next appointment." No signature. No lawyer stamp. But I could still work with this. I put the binder on the floor, got on my knees, and pulled out the old metal lockbox under my bed. The receipts were still inside. Tuition payments, utility transfers, 1 certified mail stub from when I co-signed the Honda. She said it like I wasn't sitting 2 feet away. "I'll speak for Malik. He's asked me to handle these matters." She crossed her legs, adjusted her silk blouse like it was a boardroom and not my son's future on the line. The attorney, young, polite, probably overwhelmed, glanced at me with a little hesitation, then looked at Malik, who was quiet from the morphine. But I wasn't quiet. I said, calmly and clear, "He's got a mother, and she's still living." Simone blinked, tilted her head like I'd confused her. "Of course," she said, drawing out the R like she was correcting a child. "But Malik and I are married, and he's entrusted me with his voice." That day stayed in my chest like a shard. Not because of what she said, but because she believed it. She'd been pruning me from Malik's life for years. The first time I noticed it was when she called my gumbo rustic at Christmas and offered to bring her own kale salad next time. Then she moved the old family photo from the mantel into the hallway, said she was redecorating. Later, Malik stopped sending out holiday cards, and when I asked why, he said Simone wasn't into that kind of thing. I knew what it meant. She was erasing roots, replanting him in her own soil. I'd held my tongue because Malik loved her, and when he got sick, she was there, bringing soup, holding his hand, adjusting his pillows. I told myself maybe I'd misjudged her. Maybe her coldness was just nerves. But the way she shut me out of that meeting in front of legal counsel told me otherwise. That wasn't nerves. That was control. When we left, she walked ahead of me down the corridor, whispering on the phone, her voice sharp. I stepped into the restroom, closed the stall door, and took a photo of the appointment card. I uploaded it to a folder labeled Documentation Simone. We were at Manny's, our usual corner booth near the back, where the coat rack leans a little to the left. I hadn't touched my eggs. Dolores had just finished folding her paper napkin into neat squares when I said, "She's waiting for him to die so she can collect." Her fork stopped mid-air, loaded with sausage and hash browns. "Say that again," she said slowly. I told her everything. Simone's smirk, the shares, the silence from Malik's side of the bed. Dolores didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she reached for my hand and said, "Baby, you don't wait for the casket to start fighting for your child." I looked down at the chipped edge of my plate, ashamed that I needed someone else to say it first. But she was right. Malik might have been too tired, too medicated, or too trusting to see what Simone was doing. But I wasn't. I couldn't afford to stay polite. I had a grandson who deserved a home, a legacy. I had a son whose name deserved peace, not pillaging. Dolores leaned in closer, her voice low. "You kept receipts?" I nodded. "Good," she said. "That means you can build a timeline. You ever watch a woman try to fight lies with no paper behind her? It's a bloodbath. But you smart. You've been preparing for war without even knowing it." She slid her phone across the table. "Take a picture of her voicemail. The one where she talked about taking over." I hadn't even told her I saved that. I just stared. She said we're not playing defense anymore. I left Manny's with a legal pad, Dolores' extra scanner in my tote, and a list of items to gather by Sunday. Tax returns, email headers, tuition transfers, notarized forms. She'd seen it happen before. Some church member's daughter gets taken in by a charming snake, and the family doesn't act until the obituary's already printed. Not me. By that evening, I had set up the folder on my desktop. Malik Protection Plan. That box had lived through 3 moves, 2 break-ins, and 1 basement flood. Inside was the kind of proof you don't realize matters until it does. The memo from when I paid $4,700 toward her last semester of grad school. The lease addendum I signed to let her move in rent-free. Copies of emails where I handled her insurance calls because she couldn't deal with the wait times. I even found the scanned application where I co-signed the Honda Civic she still drove. At the time, I thought I was supporting my son's wife. I thought generosity would stitch us together. Turns out, it just gave her leverage. I remembered the way she used to compliment me when Malik was around, how she called me the rock of the family during her baby shower speech, even though I cooked the whole thing and she never said thank you. Looking back, it was all theater. Sweet when she needed cover, cold when she thought no one was watching. One time, she accidentally left me off a group dinner text and claimed the thread glitched. Another time, she told Leo, my grandson, that I was old-fashioned and didn't understand how families work now. She didn't know he repeated everything, like his father did at that age. I laid out the documents across the kitchen table and started labeling them by type. Education support, vehicle, residency, verbal statements. I stapled the tuition payment to a copy of her thank you email. Labeled the Honda file Joint Responsibility. I wanted anyone reading these to know I hadn't just helped out. I had invested. Financially, legally, tangibly. That night, I pulled out the spiral notebook I used for medical notes and added a new tab in the front, estate and legal prep. Then I locked the door, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark with only the sound of my printer spitting out copies. Before bed, I emailed Pastor Green to ask if he'd seen Simone at church lately. His response came back in under 10 minutes. Not in 6 months. We were on the back porch. Him wrapped in a fleece blanket, sipping ginger tea like it was doing more than calming his stomach. He held the form up with shaking hands. "She said it's just in case something happens," he mumbled. I glanced at the printout. It looked standard, until I saw the small box beside joint tenancy, with rights of survivorship, already checked. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I smiled, said, "If that makes things easier for now," and let it slide. I wanted to believe they were a unit, that this was about love and planning, not control, but now I saw it for what it was: premeditation. That line gave her the right to absorb the condo the second Malik passed. No probate, no contest. And he'd signed it, trusting her, thinking this was about keeping her secure. I don't know if he even realized he was signing me out of the one place that still held every photo, drawing, and footprint from his childhood. I pulled the copy from the binder again and reread the header. Cook County Property Deed Addendum, November filing. I flipped to the back. Simone's signature was neat, practiced. Malik's was faint. His hand had already started giving out by then. The witness was someone I didn't know, probably one of her friends from that office she never let me visit. A coworker named Taryn, who once called me M like I was the janitor. That morning I drove to the county clerk's office downtown, took a number, and waited in line for 42 minutes. When my turn came, I asked for a copy of the deed history. The clerk handed me a printout and said, "That survivorship clause went into effect immediately upon recording. You'll need a legal motion to dispute it." I nodded, took the sheet, and filed it into my tote under a new section, Recovery Actions. By noon, I had an appointment request submitted to Aaliyah Morton, a probate attorney through Legal Aid. The confirmation came 2 hours later. Wednesday at 9:15 a.m. I saw her do it twice. Once by the stairwell, slipping a brokerage notice into her purse like it was junk mail. Another time, she beat me to the mailbox by 30 seconds and came back with a tight smile and a single grocery flyer in her hand. I didn't say anything then. But that weekend, when Malik dozed off in the living room, I opened the email account we used for joint medical paperwork. Buried in the inbox was a digital notice from Vanguard. $15,000 worth of Malik's shares had been moved to something labeled Emergency Trust. I opened the PDF. It had Simone's name on it, hers alone. That night, I waited until she left to pick up sushi to ask Malik about it. I pulled up the email on my tablet and held it where he could see. His face went still. "She told me she was just consolidating accounts," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Said it's safer that way." I asked if he'd authorized the transfer. He shrugged, eyes heavy from whatever they'd given him that morning. She said she'd handle the logistics. When she came back, I asked her directly, calm, low tone, "Why'd you transfer Malik's brokerage funds to a trust with only your name on it?" She didn't blink, just tossed her keys into the bowl and said, "You wouldn't understand financial strategy. It's about efficiency." Then she disappeared into the bathroom like it was over. I opened my phone, took a screenshot of the email, the attached PDF, and the timestamp. I uploaded them to the folder marked Asset Movement. Then I called Dolores. I told her, word for word, what Simone said. Dolores didn't even wait for me to finish. "Get a second copy," she said. "Paper, not digital. Have it ready before your legal aid appointment." That's not strategy, baby. That's theft with lipstick on. The next morning, I went to the UPS store, printed 3 color copies, and had them time-stamped by the notary on site. I paid in cash and logged the receipt. I'd logged in to check the renewal status, just a routine task I did for him since the chemo made screens too bright. But when I entered his info, the dashboard showed nothing. No active policies. No pending payments. Just a single note under the Vehicle tab. Policy terminated per cosigner request. Reallocation in progress. I stared at it for a full minute before calling the number on the screen. A man answered, chipper until I gave him Malik's name. Are you the policyholder? I'm his mother. Unfortunately, I can't. Was it Simone Reed who initiated the removal? Pause. Yes, ma'am. The cosigner requested it due to impending bereavement. Assets are being reassigned. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone like it might burn through my palm. She'd used the phrase impending bereavement, like she was planning a business merger, not watching a man die. She didn't even have the decency to wait. I thought of Malik, how he still used the seat warmer setting on that car, even in spring, because the chemo made his bones ache. How he told Leo that Daddy's spaceship would be his one day. Now it was being prepped for reallocation, like some corporate fleet vehicle. I printed the portal screenshot, the insurance note, and the call log. Highlighted the phrase. Stapled them to a sheet labeled Vehicle Disposition Timeline. Then I added it to the growing binder on my dining table. That evening, Simone walked in with Thai takeout and a new haircut. Sharp bob, fresh edges. She looked pleased. I didn't speak. Just watched her unpack containers like it was any other night. Malik asked if she brought extra peanut sauce. She said, "Of course, babe," and kissed his forehead. When she left the room, I snapped a photo of her open purse. Inside, a manila folder labeled Bryant Refinance Options. I didn't touch it, just took the photo, filed it. That was the moment something in me hardened. This wasn't just grief anymore, it was extraction. And I was done being quiet. We were at her cousin's house in Bronzeville. One of those flipped townhomes with modern light fixtures and no soul. Simone wore a pastel jumpsuit and heels too high for comfort, walking around like a campaign wife, not a woman married to a dying man. Malik sat next to me, head nodding between forkfuls of mashed sweet potatoes. He hadn't kept anything down the night before, and now he was trying to smile while his body gave out in real time. Simone raised her glass and tapped it with a butter knife. To family, and to new beginnings. Her eyes slid across the table to me. Transitions are hard, but they make space for growth. A few of her cousins chuckled, unsure. Malik barely registered it, lost in the hum of voices and medicine. I put down my fork, folded my napkin, and said, clear enough for the room. Some of us are grieving, not transitioning. Her smile froze. She sipped her mimosa too quickly, blinked once. Of course, Miss Marlene, she said, dragging out the miss, like I was the help. We're all hurting differently. I stood up to help Malik as he nodded off in his seat. His plate slid a little, and Simone didn't reach for it, didn't even glance at him. That's when I saw Pastor Green, 2 seats over, watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. He had come at my request. Just to observe, I gave him a small nod. He gave me one back. After we got Malik into the car, I sat behind the wheel and waited for my hands to stop shaking. I opened my phone, added the brunch event to the legal timeline, and wrote, Simone publicly framed Malik's decline as a new beginning. Witness present, Reverend D. Green. I also noted that Malik had barely eaten and was clearly unmedicated at the gathering. That night, I emailed Aaliyah a status update and asked if Simone's financial maneuvering during Malik's incapacitation qualified under undue influence. Her reply came before midnight. Yes, begin documentation of medical state at time of all asset changes. I printed it, labeled it undue influence, initial grounds. That night, I locked my bedroom door, cried into the deed copy, then texted attorney Aaliyah Morton. I'm ready to do this for my son. Tell me what to collect. I wasn't crying over Simone, or the property, or the money. I cried because Malik still believed she was protecting him, that he could rest, not realizing she was peeling his life apart while he lay sedated, weak, trusting. I let it happen too long because I was afraid of causing a scene. But that fear had no place anymore. Aaliyah answered the next morning. Her message was clean, clinical. She told me to start pulling bank records, everything from the past 6 months. Any power of attorney documents I had, especially those with Simone's name. She said I needed to gather examples of Simone making financial decisions on Malik's behalf. Even better, if someone had witnessed her pressuring him. And then she told me something that made my stomach turn. If we could show Malik's cognitive state was compromised when those transfers happened, the court would have grounds to void them. I spent the day scanning like my life depended on it. Because his did. Because Leo's future did. I started with the basics: POA papers, condo title, brokerage transfer. I renamed every file with exact dates and cross-referenced them in a spreadsheet. Dolores came over with ginger ale, saltines, and that look she gets when she's dead serious. She didn't ask what to do, just opened folders and handed me page after page, like she was feeding coal into a furnace. By late afternoon, I found the voicemail from Simone I'd saved months ago. Her voice, soft and too sure of itself. "Once we deal with the car and the bank stuff, the rest will be smoother." That sentence made my hand curl into a fist. I saved the audio 3 ways, labeled the folder verbal evidence, intent. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't need to. The adrenaline was enough. I'd let this woman operate in shadows for too long, but I knew where her footprints were now, and I was tracing every last one. It took 1 long breath and 2 bus rides to the credit union downtown. I brought the folder with Malik's original power of attorney, dated before she started redrafting everything behind our backs, and pushed it across the counter to the branch manager, a woman named Yolanda. She read every line twice. Asked me if Malik was still alive. I said yes, but declining. She asked if I had supporting documentation. I opened the envelope with the hospital's incapacity statement and the memo from Malik's oncologist, both notarized. Her tone changed. More focused now. "We can remove her access today. Funds will be held under fiduciary protection until further notice." The number blinked on the screen. $23,418. I signed the freeze request and Yolanda printed the confirmation. I asked for 3 copies. 1 for Aaliyah, 1 for the court packet, and 1 for my records. As I slipped them into my folder, I felt the shift. Not hope, just traction. One less lever Simone could pull behind his back. That same afternoon, I walked into the brokerage's loop office with the POA and a flash drive containing Malik's video message from January. His face pale, his voice steady, saying, "If my mom brings this in, it means I trust her to protect what's left." They verified it. Froze the shares. Flagged the emergency trust for internal review. I didn't even sit down. Just stood there, while the associate typed, eyes moving fast across her screen. Last stop, the condo's HOA office. I brought the updated resident authorization form and asked them to revoke Simone's gate access and parking decal, effective immediately. The woman at the desk raised an eyebrow. "She's listed as primary occupant." I slid over the POA and a copy of Malik's previous request, naming me as emergency contact and secondary owner. She didn't argue. She just took the file, stamped the revocation, and marked her name on the bottom in blue ink. When I left, I texted Dolores, 3 moves made. Simone's out of the money, the car, and the condo lot. Clock's ticking now. We cleared my dining table, pushed the salt shaker and napkin holder to the side, and spread everything out by category. Dolores wore her reading glasses on a chain and sorted papers with the kind of quiet fury only church women possess. "This one shows you covered her grad school fee," she muttered, circling the memo in red ink. "This one's your email asking her to confirm repayment." She paused. She never responded. I said nothing, just kept scanning. The table started to look like a war map. Bank statements, stamped envelopes, even screenshots from Simone's group texts where she joked about finally driving a car that matched her credit score. That car had been in Malik's name, and I had the lease co-sign papers to prove it. Around noon, I found something I'd nearly forgotten. Malik's handwritten note from January folded into the back of his sketch pad. "Mama," it read, "make sure Leo keeps the house. Simone won't like it, but it's what I want." His writing was shaky but clear. I stared at that line until the room faded out. Then I scanned it. Twice. Saved it to 3 folders: local, backup, external. Gave it its own heading: Leo, property intent statement. Dolores leaned over, eyes wet. "That's his will, baby. I don't care what's signed or stamped. That's his truth in ink." We kept going. uploaded photos of Malik's prescriptions next to legal forms, proving what state he was in when Simone made her moves. We added time-stamped call logs, calendar screenshots, anything that tied her actions to his decline. Every document told a story, and that story was building. Not just loss, but manipulation. Not just grief, but theft. By evening, I had organized the entire digital archive by relevance and chronology. I labeled the main folder Malik Estate Defense Master File. Then I copied it onto Dolores's flash drive, mine, and a locked cloud folder. If Simone wanted a fight, she wouldn't be dealing with just grief anymore. She'd be facing evidence. And I had enough to speak when Malik no longer could. The more I documented, the more I understood. Paper would show the money trail, but people would confirm the character. I needed both. So I started calling names I trusted. Pastor Green came by first, a soft knock on my screen door just after church let out. I gave him sweet tea and the full rundown, not just what Simone had done, but how she moved. How she only called Malik babe when others were in earshot. How she left him alone for hours, claiming errands, while I found soiled sheets and missed meds. He listened. Took notes. Then he said, "You need a statement. I'll write what I saw at that Easter brunch. I'll name names and speak to her conduct. That woman is performing grief." His words, not mine. Then I reached out to Jada, the nurse who overheard Simone that day in the hospital. I hadn't spoken to her since, but she remembered everything. "I didn't want to assume," she said, "but what she said, it was cold." I asked if she'd be willing to put that in writing. She agreed, on one condition: anonymity unless subpoenaed. I understood. She faxed me a signed statement within 2 hours. Last was Tyrone, my neighbor, retired CPD, now head of condo security. I asked him over coffee if he could pull the guest log for March and April, especially overnight entries. "You mean the nights when Bryant showed up?" he asked, not even blinking. We all saw him. Tall man, gray sweats, real familiar. I asked if Simone ever logged him in. He shook his head. She used her key fob. He walked in behind her. "I'll send you the timestamps." Later that night, I received a spreadsheet showing 5 unlisted overnight visits tied to Simone's access badge, each after 11 p.m., each with footage of Bryant entering the elevator. I saved it under unauthorized access, supporting evidence. People were watching. And now they were speaking. The story was no longer just mine. It was Malik's, Leo's, and everyone who saw the cracks she tried to plaster over with charm. It took 3 hours to get the wording right. Aaliyah reviewed my draft twice. She said it didn't need to be poetic. It needed to be precise. I wrote it in my kitchen with the blinds closed and my phone on silent. Every sentence cost me something, but I wrote it anyway. I started with the medical directive. Effective immediately, Simone Reed is no longer authorized to make care decisions on behalf of Malik Johnson. All directives are to be deferred to Marlene Johnson, designated power of attorney, until court oversight is established. I stated the reason: conflict of interest and ongoing asset transfers without full consent. I attached copies, time-stamped logs, witness statements, the oncologist's incapacity letter. I included the voicemail, the signed bank paperwork, and Malik's handwritten note about Leo and the house. Next came the financial clause. All joint asset privileges are suspended pending legal arbitration. Any further movement of funds, titles, or property under Malik Johnson's name shall be deemed unlawful until resolution. I made sure that sentence had bite. Aaliyah called it enforceable. I called it overdue. The third section was the hardest to write. I told Simone, in writing, that she was not entitled to speak for my son again unless compelled by court order. That this was no longer a family matter. It was legal now. I copied the letter to the hospital administrator, the bank officer, and our family lawyer. I printed 6 copies, signed each one with blue ink, and walked them to the post office myself. Certified mail. Return receipt. I watched the clerk stamp the envelopes. I didn't smile. When I got home, Simone was already there, curled up on the couch with her laptop open and a glass of wine in hand. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't notice I walked right past her into Malik's room and kissed his forehead. In the hallway, I paused and looked at her. "Check your mail tomorrow," I said. She blinked, confused. "Why?" I didn't answer. I just closed my door. She arrived just after noon, unannounced. The front desk nurse barely had time to call my cell before I heard the automatic doors hiss open and her heels hit the linoleum like gunfire. Her face was blotchy, hair pulled back too tight as if she got halfway through crying and decided rage would serve her better. I was in Malik's room, helping the nurse adjust his oxygen. She came in without knocking, flung her purse across the counter, and snapped, "You had no right. None of this is yours." The nurse, Tamika, froze mid-chart. Devin, Malik's childhood best friend, had just flown in from Dallas and was sitting by the window reading Psalms. He stood up so fast the chair scraped tile. "You're ruining my life," Simone yelled, pointing at me like I was the one siphoning accounts and lying on paperwork. Her voice cracked, high and unsteady. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? You're just bitter because he chose me." Devin moved between us. "Nah," he said, calm but firm. "You don't raise your voice like that in here. You don't raise hell in a room where somebody's trying to die in peace." Simone looked at him like she didn't recognize him. Maybe she didn't. She only ever showed up for photo ops. She didn't know Malik's people, just his possessions. I stepped around the bed, placed my body between hers and my son, and said, "You'll need to take that up with the court. And until then, you're not speaking to him alone." She opened her mouth, but Devin was already walking toward the door. "Let me help you out," he said, holding it open without waiting. Simone stood frozen, fist tight at her sides, until she saw Tamika picking up the call button. Then she left. I stayed behind, adjusted Malik's blanket. Told him he was safe. Outside the room, I texted Aaliyah. Public incident. Witnessed. Date logged. Let's go. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too sharp for a hospice widow and carried an envelope like it contained nuclear codes. Behind her walked some young man I didn't recognize, suit too tight, eyes twitching. Lawyer? Maybe just backup. Didn't matter. The people who mattered were already seated. Aaliyah on my left, Pastor Green on my right, and across from us, the bank officer from the credit union, Mr. Diaz, his briefcase already open. Simone scanned the room, realized fast this wasn't her audience, and smiled anyway. "Let's be civil," she said, as if she hadn't screamed across a hospice room 3 weeks prior. I didn't answer. I opened my folder, laid out the documents one by one, account statements, title transfers, medical notes, Malik's January letter about Leo and the house, and slid them across the table without ceremony. No speeches, just evidence. She reached for her envelope like it held salvation, but her hands trembled. She pulled out a statement showing she'd been maintaining the condo, copies of her name on a few joint accounts, and what looked like a revised will, unsigned. Aaliyah didn't even blink. "That's invalid. And not notarized." Mr. Diaz added, "Asset freeze is active. Beneficiary removal processed. Nothing in your name remains active as of April 1st. Simone's lips parted, but no sound came. For the first time since this started, she looked like she didn't know the next move. Pastor Green leaned forward. Quietly, without judgment, he folded Malik's final directive and set it in front of her. "Your chapter is closed," he said gently. "Let it close with dignity." She didn't respond, just sat there, hands clenched in her lap, the envelope deflating in front of her. The silence was longer than I expected. Not tense, just final. She kept glancing down at the documents like she could will them into something else, like her name might suddenly reappear on a title, a ledger, a line of inheritance. But the facts didn't bend. The bank officer confirmed the asset freeze as lawful and permanent. Aaliyah reminded her that the court had jurisdiction now, not her tears, and not her tone. Simone sat back slowly. Her posture changed. Not defeated, calculating. That was the part that chilled me. She wasn't broken. She was cornered. "I took care of him," she whispered. Not to me, to herself. A line she'd probably rehearsed in the mirror. I tapped the folder once, gently. "And he took care of his son," I said. Then I slid Malik's updated will to the center of the table. 2 signatures. 1. Notary. Witnessed by Pastor Green and filed with the county clerk. Leo and I named as sole heirs. Simone not mentioned. She didn't touch it. Didn't argue. Just stared. When it was over, she stood, slower now, like the weight of what she lost had finally settled in. Her lawyer, or whatever he was, stayed seated a beat longer, eyes flicking from paper to paper, probably wondering how he'd ended up on the wrong side of this story. Pastor Green collected the documents like pages of a sermon. Aaliyah handed me the originals. Simone walked out without a word, her heels quieter than when she'd arrived. He held it in his palm like it was a medal, not a key. Didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me with eyes that reminded me so much of his father, it knocked the wind out of me. I crouched down and kissed his forehead. "Your daddy said this was for you," I whispered. "And now it is." Outside, the lawyer filed the final motion. Aaliyah's voice was steady as ever, confirming that the estate was closed, assets distributed per Malik's revised instructions. No further contest pending. I signed the paperwork with a hand that didn't shake. The door behind us clicked shut, the echo bouncing down the church hallway like a quiet drum roll. I stood still for a moment. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm. Not peace, not yet. Just air that's finally cleared. Leo slipped the key onto his shoelace like a charm and said, "Can we go home now?" I smiled. Not big, but real. "Yes," I said, "we can."